he was smart enough to know how to be in survival mode and be out there. There was always hope. I always had this hope that maybe one day he'll wake up and say, I'm at the end of my rope. Hello everybody, my name is Pej. I'm an interventionist. I help people with addiction, with alcoholism, and with mental health try to find the path of recovery. Today I want to talk about people that do not want to see this way of life of recovery. People that, there's a lot of attempts at getting sober, but they don't actually get sober. My heart is totally heavy right now because we just lost a young man whose mom called me 2 nights ago. She was screaming at the top of her lungs. We lost him. I thought she was going to tell me that we lost him to a fentanyl overdose, because that's pretty typical in my world and what we do. But she said that he had gotten shot several times to the point of not surviving. And that doesn't surprise me with this young man either. I think about my journey with him alone. I see a lot of people come and go. I see a lot of people come and try recovery. Some will go and we won't hear from them anymore. Some will try many times. This young man tried many times, but I don't think that he actually was desperate enough to do it. His parents didn't allow him to live at home anymore. That was definitely set in stone. Like, there's no chance of that. He went through sober livings. He went through a few treatment centers, but he wasn't doing it for the right reasons. He was really caught up. He was only 19 years old. I met him when he was 17. His dad had called me and wanted to see if I could have a hand in helping him. And throughout the last couple of years, I've done everything from trying to coach him, like in a recovery sense, to bringing him into sober living, to even having him go to some treatment and do some treatment. And it's fascinating to me to see how many people were surrounding this young man trying to help him. From all different avenues, from therapists to case managers to peers that were sober to friends that he made in recovery that loved him. And he had such a good spirit too. Like, in most cases, he was always happy-go-lucky, but he just had this thing in him where he could not stop getting high. I mean, it got to the point where he was, sneaking drugs into sober livings and into rehabs. He was selling drugs to be even able to pay for his rehab, and obviously he was caught up with the wrong people, which I believe was the result of him getting shot and killed. Fascinating to also think that I've had so many conversations with him, not just via text, because I go back and I review my texts and I see like what we were talking about, how many times he told me he wanted to get better and change his life, but also the conversations of like how he was living this facade and didn't even have, he had an identity crisis. He didn't know who he was. He's a young man that was growing up in South Orange County, like to good parents that went to a good school. But because he got caught up in the music, and the type of music that he listened to was definitely glorifying drug use, drug selling, stacking money, getting girls, which they refer to in a very derogatory term, and getting nice cars, even though he never really owned nice cars. He claimed a gang, because he went and hung out in certain neighborhoods and was around certain people. He suddenly started claiming certain gangs, and he was a rapper. He was kind of talented in a sense, but that just wasn't who he was. And he lived in the facade until the facade got the best of him. I look back at my last few texts with him, and I told him, you continue this lifestyle and your ego will be the death of you. And I care about you, but I don't think that you're really on a good path. So, again, my heart is heavy. Like, I know I can't save them all, but I'll try to save as many as I can. And I also don't have all the magic words to be able to get through to someone, even as an interventionist. But I call it as I see it, and I also share my own personal experience because I was so down and out for a long time that I remember being in my addiction, and my drug addiction, and in my alcoholism, and thinking, am I ever going to get better? But I wasn't quite desperate enough or at the end of my rope to want to change my life and become sober. So, I mean, we got to pray for these people. Not everybody's going to get better. I'll miss them. As many shenanigans, as many ups and downs that we had with this guy, as resistant as he was to getting help, I'll miss the good side of him, because there was a lot of goodness within him too. I think part of him, there was a very quiet voice within him that was, trying to scream, help me. It was always seeking attention, but his disease, his addiction definitely had the best of him and was more overpowering. And also just getting caught up. Like I see this often too. A lot of these youngsters think that it looks good to be on Instagram holding wads and stacks of cash. This individual was one of those types. Personally, like back in my day when we were selling drugs or living that type of lifestyle, like I didn't want anyone to know how much money I had. Like the last thing I was going to do is broadcast and go and show it off and say, look what I got. And I think in most cases, like when kids do that, there's a couple of reasons. In many cases, it's not even their own money, or it could be their money because they're flipping some drugs like from one thing to another. Like, so there's just that time where they actually have the money in their hands. But at the end of the day, it's that identity crisis where they want people to like them because they think that they're hard, or they're like down with the hood, or they're a gangster, or they're a hustler, or they know how to clock dollars and make money. But in reality, they're just scared little boys and girls that are just trying to get attention from people. They're attention seeking any way they can. Another thing that was really interesting about him is that sometimes when he would call me and he was totally down and out, and at least it appeared that way. Like, I never really think that he was desperate enough to where it was convincing to where I thought, okay, this is it. Like, he's done. He's at the end of his rope and he wants help. But how many crocodile tears there would be often when he would call and say, I just need help. I just need help. Please, I'm at the end of my rope. I'm at this motel. And it turns out like the motel that he was at, he was actually like getting high there. And he had plenty of drugs. Like there was people that were around him that ended up telling me that he was smart enough to know how to be in survival mode and be out there, but he wasn't smart enough to make the right decisions to not intermingle with certain people that are going to end up bringing him to his demise and taking his life from him. So it's just so sad because now his parents are just devastated. They don't know what to do. I mean, they're trying to process this. It's totally raw. It's only 2 days old. And then to also, I've been following the case very closely to see the SWAT team that went to the house of the people that were possibly affiliated or part of this whole thing, and seeing them being pulled out of their houses and having them put their hands in the air and looking at them, and they're young kids. Like, they can't be more than 20 years old, right? And to think, if you had any involvement in this and you actually took somebody's life because you thought you were so gangster because you had a gun, or you used a gun, or there was some kind of raw drug deal that went sideways, your whole life is screwed now as a result of you just making bad decisions. So this whole extravagant, like, look at me, check out how much money I have, none of that stuff really like matters. It really doesn't matter. Even like in this day and age, like, there's famous rappers that are dying left and right. It's because there's so many people that are jealous of them for becoming successful, and obviously a lot of people in that rap world like to wear certain types of clothes and watches and gold and things like that. And for somebody who's down and out that's very jealous and doesn't really have that type of stuff, a lot of people become an automatic target. So how sad it is that that we lost this young man. There was always hope. I always had this hope that maybe one day he'll wake up and say, I'm at the end of my rope. Interestingly enough, I talked to his dad this morning, and I had sent his dad the video footage of the people getting arrested that may have had involvement in this. And he said, you know what? I told my son before that there's only 3 ways for you in your journey if you don't get help. 1 is that you'll end up hospitalized. 2 is that you will end up getting arrested and going to jail. Or 3 is basically you're going to die. And this is what happened. He said, my son could be those people that actually came out of the house with their hands up, and that we're going to be going away for a while, as opposed to right now where he's, going to have to be buried. So, I make these videos because I always want people to know, like, in my world, in this type of lifestyle that I live, I see a lot of different characters that come and go, a lot of people that have a lot of issues in their lives, and my whole goal is to be able to try to help them find themselves so they can become the best versions of themselves. I had some good mentors that showed me along the way when I was down and out, came out of homelessness, and I lived that whole lifestyle, a very criminal-minded lifestyle that never added up to anything. Made a lot of money from dealing drugs and lost all of it. Money ill gotten is money ill spent, right? And I had nothing to show for it, and I was basically living on the streets. And so when I got sober and was introduced to these people that were people that demonstrated what real recovery consisted of and how to be a man of recovery, I just made a pact within myself to help people. So if you know someone who's struggling and you need some kind of guidance, or if you yourself are struggling with a drug addiction and alcoholism and you're caught up in any kind of game or in your own personal prison, you can always call me. Like, I'm always here to help you in any way possible. 310-596-9356. My name is Pej, and I'm the Interventionist.